in a non-partisan way to try to make government more effective. And I think we feel that the English mayoral system is a really key part of that mission for us. There's obviously broad agreement that it's important that it should be a priority for the British state to reduce its over-centralisation, to make sure that decisions are made at the right geography and that you can get those democratic benefits that the mayoral system brings, of decisions being made closer to the people with the right sort of sense of accountability. So we're really interested, as I say, in the mayoral system. We think it's actually one of the most exciting and innovative parts of British government right now. And because that's the case, it's attracting really talented people who are all very mission-focused on making things work in their different strategic authorities, experimenting with different ways to think strategically and think about delivering services for their populations. And we want to help those brilliant, talented people who are doing that, many of whom I'm no doubt are with us in the room. We bring to this our knowledge of central government, our understanding of what's worked in terms of relationships between central government and other parts of the British state over time, and our work on public services. And we're really pleased to have built relationships with mayoralties across England in the last 5 years or so. And DevoLab is our latest initiative to strengthen those relationships, but more importantly, to help the mayoral system learn from itself, and the best examples of what is being done, being shared, best practice, maybe some lessons of what's not worked as well. We're really excited to be working with L&G on this series of events, and I'm going to go away now and let the more interesting part of the event take place. So thanks again all for joining us.
Well, thank you, Hannah, and well, good afternoon, everyone from me. So my name is Akash Pound. I'm Programme Director for Devolution at the IfG, and it's my pleasure to be hosting this session in the IfG DevoLab series, which, as Hannah said, we're delighted to be working in partnership with L&G to deliver. So what is the idea behind the DevoLab? Well, rather than me tell you all about it, here's a video we made earlier.
I'm a great believer in devolution. I'm a great believer in the idea that those with skin in the game, those that know their communities, make much better decisions than people sitting in Westminster and Whitehall.
Welcome to the IfG DevoLab, the Institute for Government's new platform for learning from the policy and governance innovations that devolution has enabled. Over the past decade, mayors and strategic authorities across many parts of England have taken on a growing array of powers, and they've begun to use them in increasingly innovative ways. A core benefit of devolution is the space it creates for places to develop their own solutions to common policy challenges, allowing policymakers across the country to learn from each other about what works and what does not. Devolution in this way can act as a policy laboratory, or what we call the DevoLab. Here are some examples of what we mean. In Greater Manchester, strides have been taken towards the creation of an integrated transport system with publicly controlled buses and trams, the B network. Local leaders in the West Midlands have repurposed the Adult Skills Fund to support thousands more people to secure advanced technical qualification. The Mayor of South Yorkshire, meanwhile, has championed a strategy to address health inequalities, for instance through the provision of free beds and bedding to under fives. In Tees Valley, the Mayor there has used devolved investment funds to save the local airport from closure as part of a wider economic regeneration strategy. In West Yorkshire, the Mayor is using her role as Police and Crime Commissioner to lead a strategy for reducing violence against women and girls. Greater London has even longer experience of devolution, a quarter century, and it's been the testbed for policies from congestion charging on the roads to public rent-a-bike schemes. And there's also much to be learnt from policy innovations in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. But how do we know what works, why it has worked, and what lessons mayors, local leaders and devolved bodies should learn from each other? Well, that's what the IfG DevoLab is for. As part of this, the Institute for Government will be hosting events, producing case studies, crunching the data, and disseminating findings to help mayors and strategic authorities take better decisions about how to use their powers and budgets. So contact us with suggestions of innovative policies or governance reforms you think more people should know about, or if you'd like to work with us to make the DevoLab a reality.
So that's the DevoLab. We launched the series in July. People might have seen that the first event focused on how mayors can use their powers and influence to address health inequalities. Next month we'll be in Leeds talking about devolution and how it can be used to improve transport connectivity. But today, it's great to be here in Birmingham on the eve of the big regional investment summit for a conversation about one of the really core roles that mayors and strategic authorities play, attracting and securing investment to support regeneration, job creation, building of new houses and driving economic growth in the places they lead. And so with the summit taking place tomorrow, ministers, mayors, business leaders will all be in the city for what I've been told is going to be something like a sort of speed dating activity with people trying to do deals to support the major growth projects that mayors across the country are championing. And it's great to have the opportunity to be part of that conversation. And we've got an excellent panel of speakers from 3 leading combined authorities from the West Midlands, Greater Manchester and the North East. Each of whom will be giving a presentation on a core strategic project or projects within their region, setting out what the mayors and the strategic authorities have done to champion those projects, to bring in the investment, to support the projects with supporting policies around transport and skills and planning decisions, and what lessons they have learnt from that experience that other places could learn from. So the speakers will each be giving a presentation from the lectern in a few minutes. We're also joined by Julia Goldsworthy, Head of Social Impact Investment at Legal & General, former Director of Strategy at West Midlands Combined Authority, also former Special Advisor in the Treasury before that. So you've seen this from a number of perspectives, Julia. Well, thanks a lot for working with us on this. What are you hoping to take from today's discussion?
So with the Investment Summit tomorrow, we know that there's going to be a renewed focus on securing the investments that places need to unlock growth. So with the 3 trailblazer combined authorities in the hot seat today, I think there should be plenty of really great lessons to learn, not just from a kind of framing point of view, but the really practical stuff about how you turn investment priorities into kind of cash, which then goes into spades into the ground and actually delivers the investments that are going to unlock growth.
Great. OK, so time to bring in our first speaker. So delighted to introduce Jonathan Gibson, who's Director of Strategy now at West Midlands Combined Authority. And Jonathan's going to be speaking to us in particular about the Birmingham Sports Quarter, which is a huge regeneration initiative people will be aware of in the east of the city. Jonathan, tell us more.
Thank you very much, Akash, and to the Institute for Government for hosting us all today. And for being in Birmingham, most importantly. We even got the Christmas markets out for you all, so please do enjoy one of the number of treats it will offer you. And great to be in a panel with quite a few WMCA alumni in the audience and elsewhere. So if nothing else, we are a platform for social mobility. So the main message I want to get across to you today, and I'm not here to speak for the Mayor, is to say that it is a very exciting time to be in the West Midlands and for the West Midlands at this point in time. In July, some of you may have seen that we published the West Midlands Growth Plan, which I have a copy of here, and you'll be able to get one nearby. And the West Midlands Growth Plan was a statement from the region, not just from the combined authority, but from 142 organisations locally, regionally and nationally who contributed to the development of the growth plan, and the biggest evidence review ever undertaken of the West Midlands, over about 18 months in the making. And it really set out that the West Midlands has some really strong and distinctive, importantly, economic foundations for growth. The scale of the region, the youthfulness of our demography and our fast-growing population, our investment record, and on that we've said, as we'll get into, there are some really exciting propositions here. But we also know in the innovation space, we see the private sector doubling down on public sector R&D funding with a ratio of something like 5 to 1. So that's for every £1 of public funding the public sector is putting in, the private sector is getting on the back of that and investing around 5 times more. And we see a similar scheme and a similar ratio on the back of the Innovation Accelerator programme that we, alongside Glasgow and Greater Manchester, have been delivering since 2023. So the region has got some really strong and distinctive foundations. And what we have set out in our West Midlands Growth Plan is roughly 4 areas of change that we need to see around people, business, place and story, and we'll come back to story in a minute. But just today, we can maybe not announce solely for you, but announce to the world at least, we have published the West Midlands Investment Prospectus, which, building on the growth plan and the narrative it sets out, articulates £19 billion worth of investment opportunities that, on the eve of the summit, as you've articulated, Akash, we think really brings home the point that the West Midlands is home to a lot of exciting investment opportunities, and we'll get into some of that in a little bit later. But our role as a combined authority is to advocate and is to make that case to the investment community. But we also need to put in some of the enabling levers underpinning that. And on Friday, our board approved the West Midlands Works Plan. So this is our statement of what we think we can do to bring around 93,000 more people into work and play our part in the government's plan to increase employment by 5% nationally. We're going to publish and take a decision on a local transport plan, hopefully next month, and also the work underway to develop a spatial development strategy is underway too, which is our approach to delivering towards 1,200 homes per year. So our role is to know the kind of breadth and the complexity of what needs to happen at a regional level, not just in terms of schemes that are ready for investment, not just in terms of the enabling infrastructure that underpins them, but most importantly, from an investment perspective, it is to tell a story and a narrative about the place. And there is so much in the investment community and elsewhere where we will have a conversation around rates of return and sites and projects. But if a region isn't telling a convincing story about where it's heading, you don't get to that stage of the conversation. And what we are hoping that through the publication of the West Midlands Growth Plan, through what we have published today as part of the West Midlands Investment Prospectus, we're telling a story, but we're also setting out what sits underneath it in very specific and substantive terms. So, as mentioned, we do think now is a good time for the West Midlands. We're articulating a narrative and we're being on our front foot about it as well. As part of the Major Investment Prospectus, we have articulated 4 place portfolios. One is Birmingham to North Solihull Gateway. The second is the Wolverhampton to Walsall Growth Cluster. The third is the Coventry Growth Arc. And the fourth is the Sandwell to Dudley Metro Corridor. So what we are articulating with them is moving beyond specific projects and specific sites, but to look at what is the cluster of projects, if you like, that hang together as part of a coherent economic geography. And the reason why that's important is because there are some investments and some projects that on their own they might wash their face, but if you look at them next to others, they seem even stronger, or they tell a different story, or they open up more opportunities. So part of our role is to do what a particular private sector actor wouldn't be able to do, which is to say, here's how all of this fits together at a place level. And we've been doing a lot of work with our local authority partners over the last 2 years in particular to build towards this, but they occupy a really central feature within the Major Investment Prospectus that we've published today. One of the elements of the Birmingham North Solihull Gateway is, as you've mentioned, the sports quarter, which is a hugely exciting development for the West Midlands. It potentially could deliver around 14,000 full-time equivalent jobs, around 4 billion in gross value added to the economy, on the back of a 60,000-seater stadium, replacing the St Andrews Stadium. And then also there is the potential for a 15,000 to 20,000 seat arena next to it. And this is one of the projects that's referenced in there. Part of the reason why that project is where it is today is for some really unique and distinctive factors about the West Midlands, our proximity to Birmingham. Stephen Knight, who wrote the foreword for our growth plan, talks about it being potentially in Zone 5 of the London Underground. He is obviously doing some really exciting work in Digbeth on the back of the Digbeth Lock Studios, the really exciting commitment from the BBC to increase its spending in the creative industries to about £40 million a year, and then some really exciting developments that are happening on the back of that, but supported by the fact that HS2 is just a really distinctive opportunity for the West Midlands, and that's why when we talk about the Birmingham North Solihull Gateway, HS2 is a massive feature both in Arden Cross, which is where it'll come up into Solihull, and then also into central Birmingham next to Curzon Street as well. So there are some really distinctive factors that are, the devolution has helped them, but some of those big national policy decisions, our role is to work out how do we capitalise on them. Because we're not saying that devolution, we can solve the world and we don't want anything to do with central government ever again, far from it. Part of our role is where is there a distinctive opportunity that we can build on some of these major decisions, and how do we then piece a local strategy around that? So HS2 remains, and has been a long time, a major part of our strategy as part of that as well. There are also some really specific and targeted actions that we have helped with to help land the commitment, particularly around the extension of the Metro, which the Chancellor announced as part of the spending review. That is the Metro extension initially to Borsley Green, but we are hoping that that will, through further funding, be able to connect us into Arden Cross, right into North Solihull as well, across an area of around 300,000 people, or close to 400,000 people. So part of our role is to know what are our distinctive strengths. How do we use some of our enabling levers to really unlock the really specific changes that the investment community needs? And then from our perspective, £4 billion worth of gross value added is amazing, but £4 billion of gross value added that helps us to reduce poverty and deprivation is even better. And that's why when we published the West Midlands Works Plan, and we articulate how do we locate multi-agency hubs in each of the local authorities around the region by 2027 to bring together DWP, DHSC, the Job Centre, because if we can help people with the variety of challenges they may face to getting into the labour market, that's how we start to join those two agendas together. Big investment, but also alongside ultimately public sector reform, helping people to get into work and reducing some of the pressures on public services that I think we all are very familiar with about. So our role is to go the extra mile beyond landing investment, as great as it is, and it is to make sure that we are making sure that that is felt as widely as possible across the region. And the Mayor's narrative around growth for everyone illustrates that he has a really prominent part of his role as well. So what lessons could we draw from that before I conclude? Well, the first is about place leadership, and it's something that I'm sure we would all say across the different areas, and you probably won't have heard it before, and it's not unique, but it is the ability to stitch together what is our diagnosis of our region, our strengths, our assets, what's happening elsewhere, how do we build together what the CA can do, what our local authority partners can do, what we can do with government, how do we stitch that together to make it really tangible? And the sports quarter proposition is a really excellent case study of that centre, regional and local partnership working through the lens of one specific project. Part of the role is about the story. So tomorrow at the Regional Investment Summit, I know all mayors, because they are advocates rightly so for their place, will be saying our region is the place to be, and and we want to see other regions succeed alongside us, but part of the role is how we can tell a story that is authentically about the West Midlands and will pass the TIPEX test if you can just replace your combined authority's name with another's and you've got the same story. So I think through what we are articulating here is trying to get into that level of distinctiveness as well. The capacity and capability, so the combined authority exists to provide that layer of capacity and capability, but I know internally and with our local authorities, there is more we could do to, for example, address some of those longer range schemes that are furthest from the market and need a lot of upfront investment in proposal development, proposition development, working out the governance, etc. And that is where we really think there is a role for some of the national organisations who are coming on the scene to work really in lockstep with us so we can do the next scheme beyond the 19 billion here to make sure that we're looking even further forward alongside that as well. And last but not least, I would also draw attention to funding. So we at the Combined Authority, last year we received the first integrated settlement, £389 million. We are reporting how that's going and it's going well. That's helpful, but there are some areas of funding, particularly on commercial site development, where we think if we could intervene in some of those strategic land sites early, we've got brownfield funding, we're able to use some of our transport levers, the private sector will build if it can seize the proposition there. Actually, there's that area of speculative land investment where we think is really important, and we're making good progress in bringing forward some of those sites across the region, but we think we could do a bit more as well. And I would just touch on the fiscal tools point before we wrap up, which is, there's some really great case studies across the country of places that have been innovative in how they've used not just tax increment financing, not just business rates, for example, but more creative interpretations of land value capture, and we would maybe say economic value capture linked to that as well, so that we can make sure the support we provide is contributing to some self-sustaining investment propositions as well. So if you weren't sold on the fact that Christmas markets are here, I would kind of hope that you've taken away from that across the region, not just speaking about the combined authority, but our local partners outside the combined authority as well, working with national government. There are some really strong foundations being built here, and there's a really good story to tell that will be on show tomorrow, that will be in the regional investment prospectus that you can now download online. But we are really kind of excited by the DevoLab to learn lessons from others. We're looking forward to the discussion today and to your questions a bit later. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks so much, Jonathan. Well, I think loads of really rich themes that I'm sure we'll explore in the conversation to come. But if people do have questions for our speakers, do keep them in mind. We'll definitely have time for in-person and online audience participation. But at this point, very pleased to welcome our second speaker, Rob Edwards, who's Deputy Head of Investment at Greater Manchester Combined Authority, who will be speaking, I think, again about the broader investment pipeline, but then with a particular focus on the sister innovation district, which is a joint venture between University of Manchester and Bruntwood SciTech. So, Rob, over to you.
Thank you, Akash. Okay, so I'm not as articulate as Jonathan, so I brought pictures. Always helps to bring it to life. So this was the first page of our Greater Manchester strategy, which we launched in July, which, building on 10 years of devolution, which we would like to say has gone very well. Not to brag, but it has gone well. But the next 10 years, how do you follow that up? That's the key question. And the Greater Manchester strategy for the next 10 years is bold and ambitious, challenging, but I think that's where it should be because there is such an opportunity over the next 10 years. So how are we going to kind of deliver that growth? Well, it's two underpinning kind of interlocking areas where we're here to talk about investment, it's all about money, what can we build? But actually the more important thing is when you put the money in, you grow your economy, what impact does that have on the people that live in the region? It's got to come back to them. They've got to feel the benefit of what we're doing, otherwise we're not doing our job properly. So, being able to invest in the place is always thinking, how is this going to impact the people? So, kind of building on that as kind of an example of one of the things that we're doing. So Sister is a joint venture between Bruntwood SciTech, which is Bruntwood, Greater Manchester Pension Fund and L&G, and the University of Manchester utilising their former North Campus, which, to be honest, I've lived in Manchester for 20 years and I didn't realise this piece of land existed. I'll show you a picture of it next. But I think what it's showing that you've got the ability within the city region and the city centre, in this case, to really make a difference and utilise the space you've got available. So here it is in its current guise. So a lot of the talk around Sister and that wider development is all about connecting Piccadilly Station, which is obviously our main transport hub, to Oxford Road Corridor, which is our kind of life sciences, advanced manufacturing district. So, connecting that to Piccadilly, which connects to the airport, gives us a very good connection to the rest of the world, ultimately. And there's a lot of great businesses that come out of the Oxford Road corridor that will benefit from being in this area. The other side of it, actually, when you flip it, is looking at, well, St Peter's Square kind of represents, is where the town hall is for Manchester. That is very much the centre of the city centre. But actually, you're connecting Brunswick and Ardwick, which is a residential area which historically has been an area that's kind of socially deprived. But that has undergone massive regeneration over the last 10 years, bringing it forward, and actually you're moving it closer to the city centre, ultimately benefiting the residents of that area with opportunities for jobs, just in terms of value, amenity, green space. So we really shouldn't miss the impact of that. It's not just about life sciences, advanced manufacturing and innovation. So what is it going to look like? So it's a 4 million square foot city neighbourhood, and roughly half of that will be employment space. A lot of that targeted at innovative businesses coming out of the universities. But also, we're talking about 1,500 new homes right on the cusp of the city centre. And as you can see from that diagram, a lot of green space. So this is currently very underutilised brownfield land that, if it was dark, you probably wouldn't walk through, to be perfectly honest, to get to Piccadilly. And then it's all about reviving those historic buildings that have been there for quite a while. So what have we done so far? So 2-3 years ago, we received a pot of investment zone funding. And of that, so the top 3 are all to do with sister. So the Reynolds building is an existing University of Manchester campus building. It's very old-fashioned, full of lecture theatres. It's not really fit for purpose. But as a kind of meanwhile use and ability to give low-cost space to innovative businesses, refurbished that, which we'll come on to kind of what that's done. We've also done meanwhile use on the Paris building, and then there is 1.8 million, which is earmarked for infrastructure for the first commercial phase coming forward. But then attached to that and kind of showing the pathway of why we've chosen it. So also through the investment zone, we have developed GM Advance, which is a recycling investment fund. So that's £10 million has gone into that, which is investing in startups coming out of the University of Manchester. And actually, when we think about the refurbishment of the Reynolds building, the acoustic panelling in that is made of British sheet wool from a business called Wool Technologies, which has spun out of the University of Manchester. So it's a really good base for them to build their businesses, but it's also really good for them to demonstrate what they can do. And then bottom right is the SMMC, which will be based in Atom Valley. So it's ultimately developing that pathway for innovative businesses to say, right, we'll get funding to start up, we'll base ourselves here. Once we've scaled up, we can move out to Atom Valley, which is where SMMC is based. And that's ultimately looking at the long-term impact of what we can do now to help generate that long-term growth. So what's it done so far? It's been open approximately 12 months. I think the key thing here is in 12 months, they've already got 57 startups in the Reynolds building. And I think they announced last week the opening of the, what was it called? The Climate Hub, I think it's called, which again is trying to create innovative space to businesses coming out of the University of Manchester with a climate tech angle to it, supporting those and providing collaborative space. The key thing on this is really to notice that it is low or no cost space. That is incredibly challenging for even the most supportive investor to do, which is why we had to intervene as a CA to deliver that space. This is what the first kind of commercial element or commercial phase of Sister will look like. So you've got C1 and C2, which are individual office buildings. They're connected with this central foyer, which you can see bottom right, which is kind of designed to bring those buildings together, space for companies to collaborate. And then you can see all around that is green space, public realm, which is really important to just improve the whole vibe of the area. So what are the challenges with that? As I just alluded to, low-cost innovation space is not viable. You can't do that as an investor, as a private sector investor. We're also in a backdrop where viability in any commercial building or housing is challenged. And we'll come on to that a bit later. But it is very, very difficult out there to get even prime office in the city centre out of the ground. You've then got the fact that it's built on a brownfield site, which also adds additional challenges to it, and you're delivering new public realm. And then one of the key things with devolution is being able to take a long-term view of your investment. What we've done so far here is because there was access to investment zone funding. If there wasn't a pot of investment zone funding available, we wouldn't have been able to do this, or not as soon as we did anyway. But you're kind of taking a funding first approach of, oh, there's a pot of money there, what can we do with it? Rather than thinking, what do we need to do? And then working out your way of funding it. So what are we doing? We're trying to intervene, is basically where we are. Not just on Sister, but across GM. Viability is very challenged. We've got a supply or a lack of supply of Grade A office space in 2027, 2028, which we need to address. So how are we going to do that? We don't have massive pots of investment zone funding or any grant for that matter. So we're taking a new look at it and we're saying, right, as the public sector, how do we intervene? Well, we want to do just enough. Right? There's no putting in as much as we want or as much as the private sector want. It's more about looking at it individually and saying, what does this really need to catalyse private sector investment? And also, let's not do it through grant. Let's be a bit more innovative. Let's think longer term. How long can we hold it to get that money back out? Because if you get it back out, you can then create recycling debt funds which can do more. And then if things go well, hopefully they do, you can capture that value and you can reinvest it, which we've utilised through our housing investment fund where we've generated surpluses and we've used those to support homelessness and other key housing first priorities. So instead of grant, these are just a few examples of some of the products we're utilising, which don't look massively innovative to most people because they're not, but they're quite innovative for the public sector to use. Traditionally it's always been grant. So just taking that longer term view to say, right, well actually if we put the money in, can we wait 10 years until values come back, then get the money back out? So this is kind of how we've started approaching it. So the integrated pipeline, you will have heard Andy talk about, Caroline talk about, it's been key over the last kind of 6 months, talking about how we're going to generate this over the next 10 years. And we're talking about £1 billion worth of investment a year for the next 10 years. We've started that process to look at what shovel-ready projects there are in GM at the moment that can't progress because of viability challenges. What can we do to intervene? The response was beyond what I was expecting. But these are all really, really good projects. We got one or two that were a bit kind of thrown in, but the majority of them are really, really good. They just need that kind of public sector partner to say, we'll step in with you, we'll take some risk, we will catalyse your investment if you believe in the region and we do. So we've kicked that off. I think Caroline will announce something about it tomorrow, so I won't steal her thunder. But we don't have enough. We've only got what we've currently got, so we are talking to government about what other funds we can utilise, and also working with partners, obviously, to see how we can fund more of that pipeline. So what lessons have we learned? I was saying to someone before, like I was trying to pick, how do you pick like just a couple? Because this process has taught us a lot. But I think the key thing is you've not got enough money, and you've got 10 local authorities that all want their projects funding, and some of them are more challenging than others. So how do you approach that? Well, I think the way we've learned to approach it is to go back round. Like, no matter how many times you think you need to speak to your local authority stakeholders, do it again. Make sure they're on board with it, because when you present back to them at the end, you need them to say, I agreed to this. Speak to the market as well. It's been really refreshing actually going out talking to developers, because they've been so open and honest. I think it's kind of worrying that that's the state of the market, that everyone is willing to be so open and honest. But open book, saying this is our challenge, this is how we'll work with you. We'll take a slightly lower return than we normally would because we just want to get this done. So that's been really good. And then, for other MCAs, we are very lucky at the GMCA. We do have a good size investment team, which has been built up over the last 10 years. But it is worth investing in that, because having the right people who can pick up a development appraisal, look at it and understand it, and then think about a different way of approaching it, it's worth its weight in gold. And it's not on there, but key for any other MCAs, speak to us, speak to West Midlands, get in touch. We're always happy to talk about it. And that's it. Okay.
Great, thanks, Rob. Do you want to join us up on stage? Yeah.
I was told to go.
You're going around that way, Perfect, cool, you're different. Amazing set of insights, and I think really, really concrete lessons in there for other places to learn from. So thanks for that. Our final speaker, Henry Kippin, is Chief Executive of North East Combined Authority. Henry will be speaking about, I think, a set of the big investment projects, including Newcastle Helix and Sunderland Riverside, and possibly more besides. Henry, over to you.
How are you? Everybody hear me?
Yeah.
It's nice to be here. I'm a West Midlands alum, I think you can say, from the Combined Authority. And I was a director alongside Julia on the first leadership team for the CA. It's pretty confusing walking through Birmingham, actually, after 6 or so years. It's like spot the building that wasn't there last time I was here, but fabulous. I know that doesn't tell the whole story of a region, and that's what I'll come on to talk about a bit, but it's brilliant to be here. Also slightly alarmed with Akash's description of the investment summit, given I'm going to be there this evening and tomorrow. Speed dating. Didn't sign up for that. There's a lot that could go wrong in that environment, but we'll sort of see how we go. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the North East. Not the only one with a North East accent on the panel, actually, which is quite refreshing. I usually absolutely am, and share quite a lot of what is being discussed. So I'll try not to duplicate and give you a sense of my region, what it's about, where it's going, because after all, narrative is king, isn't it, in terms of the investments we're trying to get away, and also the reason for doing it. So fundamentals, is there anybody from the North East know the North East? Is this new news to anybody? All right, excellent. So it's quite a big region. We're about 2 million people, but actually if you look at us geographically, and if you look at that little inset that's taken out from the map of the UK, the North East is more like Wales, you could argue, than it is Greater Manchester. So the model of city regional devolution, and, if you like, the economic model that has driven that in Greater Manchester. By the way, I loved your Liam Gallagher energy of coming on saying, I'm not saying we're the best, but we definitely are. But we could probably do with a little bit of that in the North East, but it has to be different. If you look at that region, we've got a 65-mile border with Scotland. We've got You go right to the bottom and it's Barnard Castle and Dominic Cummings Specsavers territory, and in the middle of that you've got an urban core. Parts of that region literally have more sheep than people in them. So you know, there has to be a model that works for the region that is different from a purely urban city region. So the first bullet point is illustrating that, really. We've all got our assets. Ours are absolutely about the place, its people, but also it's what you might call, in a strictly non-rude sense, physical assets as well. So we have 3 marine ports that really connect up the region to the industry that we are growing around offshore wind, for example, clean energy, relationship with the Nordics and the rest of the world. So geography is a thing, and developing an investment plan, as colleagues have said, it has to be, doesn't it, about getting beyond a list of your high GVA industries and things that have worked and you can put sure bets on because they have in the past. It's got to be about what's going to make this place tick, and it has to reflect a story, if you like. And you know, I remember doing PowerPoint slides for Andy Street here a few years ago, and it didn't matter what the issue was. Every PowerPoint slide had, we're down there, we're there, we were down there, we're there at the moment, that's where we're going. You know, consistency of narrative is absolutely fundamental. So part of what we have been doing in the region, part of what you will see over the next couple of days from our mayor, who's doing a really good job, is that story of Northeast Renaissance. And some of that is about the public sector getting itself together, you know, to catching up with reality. We in the region have a really strong collaboration between industry, between parts of the public sector and government, between people, between the voluntary sector. We've taken our time to get to a devolution arrangement that reflects that, but we've moved quickly since. So a big devolution deal, the biggest per head in the country, I would argue, and did through the process indeed, that is necessary given the inequality that has affected the North East over time. But about £1 billion of investment of public money as risk capital, as we'll come to, in projects since then, which range from the people bit of the puzzle, which is not just about doing inclusive growth, it's about recognising that if you look at any account of prosperity of a city, a place, a region, a country over time, over the long term, they will all say that human capital is at the root of what makes places successful. So how we do that alongside the bricks and mortar is absolutely key, right the way through to the kind of heavy industry and, of course, the enabling transport infrastructure that we're all constantly pushing for more of. And what you can see is the emergence of a really interesting arc in the region from being the place where the coal was dug out the ground first and Stephenson's rocket appeared, and, you know, we all lay claim to the Industrial Revolution. I used to do it when I was here. But there is a narrative arc there about coal out of the ground and into a post-industrial slump, which actually is profoundly affecting in terms of the shape of our communities, the connectivity within the region and the region's confidence, and into a world in which, in terms of clean energy, offshore wind and the transition to that, you're starting to see the same kind of leadership emerge. When you get a sniff that that's happening, you have to take it, you have to build on it, you have to move fast, you have to embrace risk as a public sector and start to invest in places that you previously wouldn't. So all of the difficulties of doing that, the viability, the land value, the fact that development is difficult, you can times that by 10 in a part of the country that actually, even when we talk about the north, is often left behind. It's usually an M62 conversation, isn't it? Well, we can't have that. So moving that debate on and thinking about how can we use public sector leadership and devolution to drive a different way of working on development is fundamental to us. And I would argue to all of you, because the country's knackered if you've got what the economist Duncan Weldon called Portugal with Singapore in the bottom right-hand corner. It doesn't work for anybody, does it? Okay, so you've got to write some stuff down. Right, that is clear, that is true. Investor confidence, being able to have a long-term view on what is happening and putting patient capital to work, different types of patient capital, I should say, side by side, is absolutely fundamental. You've got to mean it. It's got to be, how can I say this, not a work of fiction. So this wouldn't be the first time that anybody from a region like ours has put in front of you a plan for growth. It probably is the first time that actually we've had the degree of investment and or stimulus in that plan that will be needed to make it real. And I was going to say the third leg of the stool, but this stool's already got quite a few legs if you look at the bullet points. There is a really important piece coming for all of us as combined authorities. Greater Manchester have got there first. Our spatial planning, the way in which we think about not only housing numbers, but how kind of physically, geographically, and in human capital terms, we link the region and really start to drive long-term investment against that, most of which doesn't come from the public sector, frankly, it is a really important moment for all of us. So completely, really in your shadow in terms of how you've managed to leverage that principle in terms of individual development projects. But actually, part of what I wanted to say here was, I could sit here and talk about Newcastle Helix and Sunderland Riverside, and I will in a minute, but that is not the point, really. The point is to recapitalise our regions, isn't it? It's to develop consolidated pipelines of projects that are cross-subsidised. That means you're not only getting away straight-up debt finance in Newcastle city centre because it's more viable, but also some of the projects that are more difficult in places like South Shields and County Durham and Northumberland. That is my job, and that is more difficult than here's how we make a single site or project viable. That is really important for us all to remember, I think. And it can be done. Versions of this can be done. So if I just give you a flavour of what we've been up to, we are now the country's the first AI growth zone in the UK. It's taken me a little while, I have to say, to understand what that means. That there is well, it's one of two things, right? One is we've got loads of land and some power, some space to put a big shed. Or we have an opportunity to combine that, which is true, that's a geographical fact, with some new creative thinking and supply chain investment to translate AI and data capability into some of our fast-growing and high-growth industries, the Nissans of this world, for example. That's a huge, huge opportunity for us. None of us have got our heads around what that means yet, but actually, it ain't going to happen by accident, is it? It's not going to happen without really strong public sector investment and a guiding hand. We also have an investment zone which is performing really well. It links our big industrial sites, which also coincidentally are our R&D sites, and that's part of the mix here, isn't it? That, as you've seen from Manchester City Centre, the sweet spot here is about urban regeneration and redevelopment that also levers the capability of our research-intensive universities. Look at this place that we're sat here. For those online, it's pretty impressive. We need to do more of that in a climate where our universities are having to shift their business model too. So we're starting to work through some of that in our investment zone. And if you look at the bottom and the top of the region, that big graph I told you about before, lots of activity in the urban core and through the port and in the city centres, but also a 50 billion Blackstone investment in the biggest data centre that we'll see in the country for quite some time, hyperscale, they call it. A gigafactory outside the Nissan plant in Sunderland. I remember here in the West Midlands talking about gigafactories in Coventry for years. We're on to our second. And then if you look down into County Durham, you'll see what was a key project for one Tony Blair when he was Sedgefield MP, Net Park, and the potential investment in some of our satellite and defence emerging industries as well as kind of key reasons. And I suppose examples that you can do this outside of the urban core, you can connect, but you have to make really deliberate connections between regeneration, housing and place within your urban centres and what is happening in the periphery. You have to give reasons to connect those things. And of course, some of that comes then through the transport investment that you can see on the screen here. Extension of our metro, we make a nice loop. So everyone loves a loop. Turns out human beings love a loop as well because it doesn't take 4.5 hours to get from one end of the metro to the other and back. So you'll see the original Washington, I must say, the real one in Sunderland. The red bit of that graph is our Washington loop. And alongside that, some really, really, I think, pretty brave investments in things like child poverty reduction. Now, we have pledged 30 million quid, which is a drop in the ocean in terms of the child poverty numbers and, if you like, the inequality challenge in our region. But it's pretty novel for a combined authority. It's quite brave for a mayor to be saying, I'm going to get rid of child poverty when you know for a fact it's going to take 4 mayoral terms to do it. And then go and get elected on a platform which says we're on our way and we're trying, give us a bit, So there's some real bravery in there in terms of the social spending and social investment here. The fact of the matter is, your urban regeneration is useless without the social scaffolding around it. It creates ghettos, it creates communities that are devoid of people. It might create economic activity in the short run, but it won't work in the long run. And actually, that's part of what guides the Helix investment that we've worked on over time with Julia and colleagues at LNG too. So, said a little bit about all of this, and you've heard lots on the specifics from colleagues. I wanted to pick up a couple of lessons, so that part of the homework for me was, what have we learned? And I guess the truth is we're still learning it, aren't we? And many lessons we would share. In terms of urban regeneration and what has worked and what is working in our places, I absolutely think that a shared sense of risk and return is absolutely fundamental. You need, if I look at the Helix in Newcastle, for example, that is in effect a tripartite project. It's the university, it's the city council, it's LNG, it's latterly the combined authority. It's different types of capital brought to bear to bring projects to life. It is building on a financial mechanism, in this case, TIF, the Accelerated Development Zone in Newcastle. You need a mix of those things. Sunderland Riverside, exactly the same. So getting Crown Works away, which is our new film studio and housing complex, will require all of these things, but also the growth zone incentives that came through our devolution deal, which is in effect about being able to borrow against future business rates retention. So you need a mix of all of those things in there. We have just announced and will be reinforced by hopefully government colleagues tomorrow, a mayoral development zone for Newcastle and Gateshead, the if you like, the kind of economic part of the economic core of the region, I should say, because shared leadership and single point leadership of a diverse range of projects for a place is important too. And we're increasingly seeing that in our market engagement. Our partners in the private sector, whether that's pension funds or otherwise, want to see single point leadership, and they want to see that joined up across our place. That's fundamental. I've talked a bit about our new industries. The one point I would pull away from that, and we've got Lorna and colleagues in the room from Wealth Fund as well, you need everybody to be weighing in. If I think about our biggest inward investment successes currently, they're about taking risk with a market that's changing. Offshore cabling, a great example. We need OFI, we need the National Wealth Fund, we need the Department of Net Zero, we need the Treasury, we need the regional authorities, we need planning from a local authority. You cannot do any of that on your own. You have to be walking into that with a sense of the big collaboration you want to build. And then lastly, I would say, to kind of go back to the start and the base principles here, really. What are we trying to do here? We're not trying to tell you how to get projects away. You don't need me to you need people like this, not me, to talk about how to get specific projects away. What we need in the medium term is a way of recapitalising our regions so we can start to imagine that in a basis that's not kind of hand to mouth or deal by deal. That is absolutely fundamental. And until we enable the devolution debate to go there, or the process to go there, we're always going to be in that position where we are kind of asking for help for things that the regions should be driving themselves. So let me leave it there. I'm sure there's loads that will come out of Q&A, but thanks for listening. Cheers.
Brilliant, thank you, Henry. Julia, over to you. As mentioned, you've kind of sat on all sides of the table when thinking about this topic. I mean, what do you see as the distinct role that mayors and strategic authorities can play? And now, as an investor, I mean, what are you looking for from mayors and local leaders as you decide, as companies like LNG decide how to allocate their funds?
Yeah. And before I do that, I think it's probably just worth, fantastic set of contributions. There's a lot of consistency across them as well, which is really encouraging. And I think just not to lose sight of why this matters. So poor regional growth isn't just a challenge for individual regions. It's a big problem for UK PLC. We have some of the highest levels of regional economic inequalities in the world, as well as lots of inequality within those places as well. And that's not just bad economically. It's, as we've heard, it's really poor. It's bad for the people that live there as well. If you look across the Northern Powerhouse, 1/3 of the productivity gap is down to poor health. So the importance of thinking about this as a system and realising that these things are different sides of the same coin. It's not trading off one for the other. You have to think as a system. And I think fundamentally, that's what is important for combined authorities and strategic authorities. It's that ability, kind of through soft powers as well as hard ones, to try and bring together that system. And from an investor point of view, our commercial goals are aligned with that, right? So we're an institutional investor, we have to take a long-term view. So that aligns with working with places that are also trying to take a long-term view to generate outcomes. We also have customers in all of these places. So we have a responsibility not just to ensure that their pensions get paid, but also that we've got an opportunity to show that the way in which we're investing their savings is also benefiting the communities that they live in. And we've signalled, I think there's a role for the sector too in being really clear about our commitment. So we've seen government kind of show through a whole load of policy levers what they are doing to try and tackle like a decades-long challenge of underinvestment across the UK, whether that's the Mansion House reform, some of the policy levers they pulled in terms of planning, and an increased appetite to think about exactly some of these innovative funding models, like to be more encouraging of kind of think about all the different types of capital and how public and institutional capital can work together. So it feels like that landscape is an encouraging one where there's an opportunity for all of us to do a bit more. And we've seen today the Sterling 20 launch, so that's kind of institutional investors as part of the Mansion House Accord being much more upfront about our commitment to work together. So there's like a sector role as well as L&G today making an individual commitment to say we're going to invest £2 billion into impact investments that are going to achieve exactly some of the goals that we've heard about today. So all of that's really encouraging. And then just to reflect on some of the kind of key ingredients of success that I've heard, which I think are absolutely aligned with what investors are looking for. So I think this piece around clarity on the story, on the opportunity, and an understanding of what makes the region distinctive. I think that is really, really important because ultimately you need to understand what you're investing in and what it's going to contribute to and what the wider goals are. I think the importance of having kind of that systems leadership as a place at a cross-sectoral level, speaking with one voice is really, really important as well. You only get that clarity of message if everyone is speaking the same message. And with the regions that we're able to work most effectively with, it doesn't matter whether we're speaking to the university VC or the leader of a council or the chief executive of the combined authority or any different combination of those things. The most effective just relationships are ones where we know we're going to get the same messaging, the same kind of priority, regardless of who we speak to. And also that's important because it generates momentum. It's not just kind of from an investor point of view, but if you're engaging with government as well, if everyone's saying different things to different departments at different times, then it's really difficult to get that kind of overall sense of priority. Another C, I'm afraid there seem to be lots of Cs. There's a piece around capacity and capability, which I think we heard from today as well, that enables places to engage on equal terms with investors and to be and to be able to test and be confident, right? That am I talking to someone who's aligned with trying to achieve the same outcomes that I am? And I think that's also important for driving forward opportunity at pace. If you're going to explore some of these more innovative models, you need to have that capability, but you also need to have that confidence to engage as well. And I think that's where there's a role for central government, not just in thinking about how they can help provide some specialist capability, maybe if there's particular issues around procurement or legal structuring, but also do that in a way that is helping grow the core capability of places, because not all combined, I wouldn't say even all combined authorities have the kind of capability that we've heard about today. We've seen the OFI, I think, are doing really good stuff in this space, and in terms of helping places identify and progress strategic sites. It's great. I hope that continues, as long as it doesn't turn into here's a threshold for which, show us how you meet this bar, and then once we've accepted you're a strategic site, you can then, we don't want it to become another kind of competition for resources, effectively. I think, again, where I've seen the most effective relationships is where investors can sit alongside places and co-develop. So we're not brought in at the end of the thinking, we're brought in at the beginning, so we can work together to a set of shared outcomes around what structures and investments are going to create those outcomes. And I think, the final thing is that you have to try and hold these two things about being impatient and wanting to progress and kind of get going and get spades in the ground, whilst at the same time realising that it is a long game. If you're talking about long-term growth, these things you're doing are going to have a long kind of half-life in terms of their impact on the economy and communities. And so in Cardiff, we've invested, I think, £1 billion it's been 20 years. So it's kind of signing up to that really long-term project of walking alongside places and helping them. Scale of the challenge is huge, but so is the opportunity. And I hope this investment summit will be an important point in just helping build the pipeline, because ultimately, unless you've both got the pipeline coming forward and investors' appetite up for investing, then we're not going to get the progress, we're not going to see the growth, we're not going to see the outcomes that we all want to see.
Great. Okay, thanks, Julia. So we will come to audience questions shortly. I can see questions coming in online. Anyone watching, do continue to submit your questions, or you can vote for others that you'd particularly like answers to from the panel, and there'll be a mic in the room as well. Before that, I wanted to start also, I mean, Julia, what the first thing you drew from the three presentations was also where I wanted to start, which is this question of the consistency of the story that places need to tell. And that was absolutely a common theme, I think, across the three presentations. So I'd just be interested in reflections on what really makes for an effective and compelling story, and how can mayors in particular play a central role in developing that story for places. I mean, there's lots of regions will be electing mayors for the first time over the coming years. There's new mayors in post. What are the lessons they could take from your experience in that regard? I mean, Henry, you spoke about having that narrative arc, but important that the story is not a work of fiction as well. So it's got to be rooted in the evidence and the data.
I suppose I'd we'll reinforce that point. We'll come back to that in a sec. But I am asked a lot as a not because I've got any great wisdom, but I'm a relative veteran of devolution arrangements, having worked in the West Midlands and then North of Tyne and then now North East. And you've got a lot of parts of the country that are on the journey now. And they will be creating new mayoral positions, as you said. And a lot of that in the context of local government reform as well. It's administratively really tricky. And I suppose the thing that, reflection, that it is so important to have a version of why are you doing it? What's it for? I mean, I don't mean that to sound glib or trite. If you are going through a process of devolution because government's asked you to and you don't want to get left behind, and it's probably better than not doing it, it's not enough. It's not going to stick. You're not going to be able to create that sense of what the region is there to deliver over the long run. So really focusing on what is your purpose, what are you there to do? That's one. Second, not every region can do this or get there, or indeed it's right for every region, but it's quite good to have a big thing. In the West Midlands, the early narrative around the combined authority, really, and there's some people in the room who were there at the time, was about how does this region take advantage of HS2? That was the thing that sat in the middle of all of it. In Greater Manchester, you could argue there's been a few versions of that, but in recent history, the buses is a good version, isn't it? Of the kind of big things that that you cannot do in any way other than absolutely together and with shared resource and shared leadership and a recycling of money in funding and finance around the region in a way that you couldn't have otherwise. So that is completely fundamental. And then the last thing is you've got to base your story in some form of reality that people can see already. You have to. So I talk about offshore wind and jobs in the clean energy sector because there's already 5,000 jobs on the Tyne. There's 15,000 jobs across the Rydal region. When I say we can add 10,000 more, I'm totally confident. It sticks. It's a story I can be confident about because it has a basis in what's happening already. If you're miles away, we're all Silicon Valley tech hubs and nobody believes it and none of it will come true. So that bit's really important.
Yeah. Jonathan, building on that, I mean, what really worked from your perspective in pulling together, that you spoke about the 18 months or so piece of work that led to the growth plan, and what were the real success factors there, and also what role particularly does the mayor now play in telling that story? What makes for effective mayoral leadership? So,
you have to know your distinctive strengths and challenges, and to the point that was alluded to, you could talk about one or a number of things, but what are the things that really do turn heads about your particular place? What is the credible narrative and evidence base that you can bring together to underpin that, so people know that this is built and is kind of worthy of backing by a public sector organisation? But I said they are largely your must-dos, but in terms of through the growth plan, we spent about 18 months and involved a lot of different partners together, and we would hope that through that process people are able to see their particular kind of contribution to that it does speak for the region. It's not job done, we're doing more. But that's important not just because there is no monopoly on good ideas and we need to involve others in the policy making process, but also that we hope people are now able to, as we see, able to latch onto it and also talk about it themselves and talk about their particular angles on it as well. And that's part of the role of CA, is about the way you develop your strategy and all the analyses we have done of other regions globally that have done this very well. If it doesn't have shared buy-in, exactly as you were saying, Julie, if everyone is telling a very different narrative, then you're stepping on each other's toes and it's not working. But I do hope, on the 21st of July when we launched it, we had all the 7 leaders and some deputies there in Wolverhampton, and it was a real show of collective force. The kind of civic leadership of the region is behind this, and I think that tells a story in of itself. And I would just say, the weight. So we're talking here about a narrative to the investment community, but I think to echoing what Henry said, the vibe that people have of what it's like to live on a place and what they will put on TikTok or what they'll put on social media, what it feels like to live in Coventry or Birmingham or elsewhere, you can't really spin that too much. If you're trying to invest in, the quality of people's lives and in public sector reform and in skills and innovation and in apprenticeships and in good quality housing, that influences the tone with which people speak about a place beyond these nice documents, as nice as they are. But you can't quite substitute from the kind of authentic story that people and businesses there tell. And that's why, our job is about moving beyond, the Regional Investment Summit to more important is and making sure that the benefits are being felt. And I think we all recognise, right, running a region and the government of a region is a complex thing to do, and we are not quite getting that right yet. But I think that is where the narrative tells itself, and we don't need to publish anything because people are actually articulating what it feels like. So we can talk about how you do a strategy, how you do a growth plan, how you do a prospectus. There's relatively kind of key things that you need to get right and a toolkit to do that. But how you make, to the recapitalisation point, how you make your regions feel like this is a place I want to be, and I'm going to tell someone that, I'm going to be here. That is the kind of essence of where we're trying to get to ultimately.
Great. What about, in the case of Greater Manchester, you've got the long established 10-year strategy. You mentioned it was updated and republished in July. How central has that been in telling that story to investors and the wider world about what you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, I think it's quite a weighty tome, so I'm not sure all investors have probably read it. But it's about that consistency of message and that kind of overarching idea and vision for investors to buy into, to say they know what they're doing for the next 10 years. Because that's what really drives regional investment. It's stability. It's a bit of momentum to go, right, they're moving in the right direction and they know what they want to do and how they can get there. And I think, the GMS, it's very wide-ranging, but it all comes back to those kind of 2 key elements of growing the economy and the people. And I think, in terms of the mayors and how they give that message and how they support the message and the vision, our mayor gets a bit of stick in the press for the number of times he rolls out the same story about how he moved to London because there were no job opportunities in Manchester at the time. But it's true. And that is the overarching kind of thing that we're looking to overcome. It's building a place where people want to stay. So when you're looking at outcomes, there's various outcomes mentioned around number of homes built, number of square metres of floor space, all these great things. Ultimately, we'll be judged on, in 10 years' time, is it a better place to live? Is it a better place to get a job? That's the fundamental thing, and I think that's what the mayor is quite good at getting across, even though he rehashes the same story to do it. But you need that consistency of message. People buy into it because it's real, it's tangible, you can feel it, and that's that is building momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. And Julie, you mentioned in your remarks the importance of the capacity, the capability that functioning strategic authorities have and need to have to make a success of all of this. I mean, what do you think are the challenges they face then in building that capacity to ensure they are able to make a success of this?
Kind of, there's part of it is about leadership, which could be political leadership or could be institutional leadership. So you can't build the capacity underneath unless you can see the priority at the top of an organisation on what the key opportunities are that are going to drive change, that complement that broader narrative. So it kind of sits underneath that. And I think part of the challenge has been that kind of local government has been stripped right back. It's been under financial pressure for a very, very long time now. So if you look to emerging strategic authorities, the kind of residual capacity across those places has been really, really pressurised. So it's partly that. I think part of it is the specificity, I think, of some of those skills that you need. So like to do exactly the kind of jobs that you talked about in terms of being able to look at an investment opportunity and understand whether it stacks up. Those are difficult skills to acquire and retain. And then also, I mean, in particular kind of structures, so in some cases, like procurement might be the key obstacle to making progress. In others, it might be getting a legal view on the structure. It might be on the financial structuring. So I think regional and strategic authorities, there's an opportunity to build that reservoir of capability in a place that can then be deployed, potentially even in projects that sit kind of at levels below that, but you've got the opportunity to draw on it. And I do think there is that piece around shared capacity that kind of goes up as well. So what I've been really interested to see is how, there isn't a cookie cutter of here's what you need to do to be an effective combined authority, and then once you've nailed your narrative, you're done, right? This is a constantly evolving process, and as the number of mayoral combined authorities grows and strategic combined authorities grows, that cohort evolves as well. So I was really interested to see the launch of Great North at UK Reef this year, which is then also not just thinking at a combined authority level, but actually thinking at a bigger regional level. Actually, what is the common cause that we can make either to government or to external investors that helps kind of, it's not competing with the regional story. It's kind of how you elevate it to a larger scale so that it's appropriate to the different kinds of investment. The conversation you might have with an investor like L&G who knows the UK well is very different from someone who probably doesn't understand the regional economic dynamics so well.
Great. Okay. Henry, do you want to come back quickly, and then I'll come to the audience?
Quickly something to that. I think Julia's right. There is a bit of this we have to reflect back on ourselves. So there is a who was it? Carly Simon, "You're so vain" kind of clause in all of this, which is to say that I think when we talk about resource in our region, when we talk about capacity, we don't always have to mean in our own organisations. I did a peer review of Greater Manchester 3 years ago now, and one of the things that came out of the review that was really fascinating was that you just couldn't tell sometimes. When people talked about GM, you couldn't tell whether they were in the combined authority, working for a council, within the business community, or they just liked the fact that they were part of the team. You kind of want that, don't you, over time? So we are not competing with the councils in our area for staff. You want this to be additive, don't you? You want resource into your region, not a merry-go-round of people because one organisation's trendy and another one isn't for a short period of time. That's one. Second thing is, it is not okay for consistent and sequential governments to commit to devolution, to do positive and progressive things on devolved policy and powers, and continue to grow Whitehall capacity whilst not supporting the same thing in the regions. That's what we've seen. So that leads you to a place where actually you're misusing the notion of what the civil service really is. The concept's not seen as broad enough. You don't use the delivery capacity that you've got out there in the regions and strategic capacity, frankly, to make better policy. And you support the centre whilst passing all the risks to the periphery. Not okay.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, well, can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure, yeah.
That's all right.
I'm just conscious of the time, but I'm happy to carry on.
To what extent the kind of moving Whitehall out of central London has made a difference, and whether the Darlington campus of Treasury has made any impact on that, or what you've identified?
Yes, good start, definitely.
And there's a couple of other questions about central government that I'll throw to the panel in a minute, but keen to come to the in-person audience. So, my colleague's got a mic. There's a gentleman there, and then lady at the front, and then we'll take one more. I'm going to just take groups of 3, so, yeah.
Thank you. I'll throw no, it's working now. Amardeep Gill, Trowse and Hamlins, thank you very much. English Devolution Bill expands your competency framework, so with more powers, Henry, comes more money as well. But in terms of fiscal autonomy, it's somewhat limited. You get some fiscal tools, levies, charges, precept, but not the real autonomy that will perhaps turbocharge some of your aspirations. Do you is that a truth, or do you think there's enough there, or is there more that can be done in terms of that fiscal aspirations that you may have that is lacking in terms of the proper devolution?
Okay, we'll take 3 questions together though. So there's a lady here.
Thank you. You can hear me okay?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Great. I'm Sukhvinder. Many years ago, I was on the board of the West Midlands Regional Development Agency. Gosh, that's showing my age, isn't it? But the last 8 years, I've been on the board of the London Legacy Development Corporation in the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park. And I was quite interested in the point, Julia, I think you made about linking investment with productivity. I think you referred to a third of the productivity gap being in health, and there was also reference to child poverty as well. And I suppose in East London, where we've managed to do a lot of work around East Bank, 13,000 houses in that area, but the work on inclusive growth and the inclusive economy still remains as a challenge. And I just wondered whether you could say more about what investors might look for in that particular area.
Okay, and then, the gentleman at the end there in the blue shirt.
To break the optimism in the room, but as an investor, what is the rate of return that an investor, a commercial investor, not a government, not yourselves, is looking at? Because there is a big difference between, and I think it was the gentleman from Greater Manchester said, what we're looking for is jobs, X, Y, Z. That is not what an investor is looking for. He is looking for his rate of return. And the bugbear I have about many of these plans, but curiously not all 3 of you share it, is there is a reliance on investing in city centres. If there's one thing that has been over-invested in, it is city centres. Some people seem to have forgotten that so many people buy things online now. And the other one is the crisis that we're trying to kick into touch but have not done yet, is the universities are not necessarily going to grow. In actual fact, some of them are bankrupt and may actually disappear. And they have in North Wales already.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan, do you want to pick up on any or all of those questions?
Yeah,
briefly.
Good question. So I think the final point around rate of return, so I think we are really realistic that the market needs its rate of return, the different lending rates above gilts range from, the National Wealth Fund is quite generous, the public sector works loan board, it's quite generous. The market asks for a bit more. Our role is to say, we get that is the nature of how you structure propositions if you want to get there. Our kind of role is to say, well, actually, are we able to de-risk and support some of that? So the work underway to extend the metro, for example, to the sports quarter, to Bosley Park, that is part of our way where we can say, actually, you've got your investment requirement, but can we support the footfall to the stadium? Can we support, the attractiveness of it? So part of this is about, yes, we know that there are certain propositions, and in the investment prospectus, we don't get into that level of detail, but that's the nature of the bilateral conversation and negotiation we have with the investment community. But our role alongside that is to do the proposition development and to put some of the enabling infrastructures. That does help it as well. And I think the one thing in the West Midlands we are really conscious of is, we are the proud home of Birmingham in the West Midlands. You know, it represents 40% of our GVA, but the West Midlands is more than just the story of Birmingham, important though it is. And if you look at the growth plan, we are articulating, and in each of the kind of areas of the West Midlands, there are areas where different places have different sectoral strengths that are leading, and there are some nice maps in the growth plan that give that map to say, you know, in Wolverhampton around the Green Innovation Corridor, into Dudley and Sandwell on the back of the Metro Corridor, and also in Green Power Park, and obviously in Arden Cross. Our story, we offer that bit more than it is just about your city centres, and that's a really important part of the story the West Midlands tells, which is a bit different to how we kind of interpret this from you know, the London example, important though that is. On the fiscal tools point, Amadip, so we would agree. We know this is a challenging subject, but what we would say, just look at where fiscal tools have worked. Obviously, London and is not the replicable example, but it works when you're able to bring together some funding that you're able to raise, grant funding, commitments by government. You know, there are some extra powers coming through, the mayoral levy, etc. The more flexibility of a precept, it's part of the mix. So we would say, you know, it is good that the devolution white paper has got us to this point. But when you look at some of the examples of big regen and some of the examples around land value capture, you know, you are able to kind of go that step further and provide, you know, ongoing rates of investments to prop up that as well. And I will let others come back on the point around investment productivity. That's okay.
Sure. Rob?
Where to start? I'll just go in order. Fiscal devo, no, it's not gone far enough, is the reality. But what is encouraging is the conversations we've been able to have over the last 6-12 months. You know, the direct conversation with central government has been really good and encouraging. And I think there are lots of avenues for us to explore to make the most of that. Which, you know, hopefully will come forward in due time. But obviously it is an important lever for us moving forward to achieve our aims. On the inclusive economy, it's really difficult. It is, you've got to think long term, because, you know, you can look at, you know, kind of similar to the project you were on, you know, Old Trafford regeneration, as part of that whole regeneration of kind of Western Gateway. Yeah, that is all about, there's discrete investment projects within it, but ultimately the long-term aim of that, and why we've set out that as a growth location, is to bring that inclusive kind of growth in there for all of the residents. It's not just about a stadium. And it should never just be about a stadium. That is something that, you know, they will get on with, and they are obviously involved in it. But the bigger objective is to regenerate that whole area for the residents who live there. And, you know, there is no short-term answer to that. It does take time, but as long as you've got the vision and you know why you're doing the short-term things, for the long term, you know, that's just how you've got to approach it, and that is always key to how we approach those. Rates of return, it's a very thorny subject. It depends which investors you speak to. Obviously, it depends on the time frame. A lot of investors are forced through whatever vehicle they've used to raise the money. We need to get out in 4 years and we need X as a minimum rate of return. The reality is a lot of those people you just can't work with to deliver these things, because it either takes a lot of public money and it's not a good, efficient use of it, or you just can't get to a position where you agree what they should get out of it and what is kind of the minimum we need to put in. So that, you know, it just doesn't always work, is the answer. You've got to be realistic. We're realistic that the private sector need a return. You know, we're not saying do it for free. We're not saying do it for a 5% IRR, because, I mean, some will, because they see the long-term value in doing that. Most won't, is the reality. So you've got to pick and choose who you invest with, and they've got to be bought in. I think just quickly on the city centre piece, because it's a big conversation piece in GM, because, you know, a bit like Birmingham, you know, Manchester city centre is the dominant employment force within GM. But it's not the only employment force in GM. And I think when you look at our growth location plan, the spatial development plan, it's very much about bringing the other kind of 9 districts up to the level of Manchester. It's never going to be up there with Manchester, but it'll each have something like Atom Valley will be transformative for that part of kind of north Greater Manchester. So it's taken that kind of longer term view to bring those back up as well.
Thanks. Henry, I actually want to chuck a couple of different questions that have come in from the online audience to you, and then I'll bring in Julia on any or all of this. So one is from an anonymous participant. Besides financial metrics and performance measures, how will outcomes such as public benefits or public value be assessed in investment schemes? Value for money has often been vague and difficult to measure beyond financial cost-benefit measures, and I think you've spoken quite a bit about the wider benefits that you're trying to achieve through investment. So interested in your thoughts on that, and then also question: what are your experiences and opinions on the use of the Green Book for the appraisal of local projects, which the Treasury Green Book, which maybe relates to the previous question, whether that acts as too constraining of a assessment methodology when deciding in which projects to invest.
Okay.
So,
can't believe you gave me the Green Book question, honestly.
I'm sure you have.
Every round table I ever go to, there's a question about the Green Book. The answer is the same, which is that you can either use it to enable you or constrain you, depending on your view of, in particular, the strategic case you're trying to make and the degree to which your political team is willing to take a risk on the right things. So that's my answer to that question. I think we could go through a million more reviews of the Green Book that won't change that much for various good and bad reasons. Its application and how we make sure we get the strategic case right within the wider context in which we work is the most important thing. And by the way, the bit, as I was listening to Sukhvinder's contribution, I was thinking about kind of culture and creativity and the way I think one of the things that allows us to do things that you would traditionally have used revenue for, but with capital, because that's the world that we're in, right? It has to come through more investment in the culture and creative sectors as a way of connecting communities to the kind of assets that we're creating in our places. And if you look at where politics is at the minute, that is absolutely huge space that everybody is trying to kind of get into and do more on. So I think that's part of the answer, and I think we've maybe a bit undercooked. In terms of, let me give you an example to the first question. What do we measure? What do we care about? Well, we kind of get to choose that, right? So devolution, if it's about anything, should be a degree of adherence to the strategic goals of the region and the things that you care about. Our lives aren't quite like that. We're held to account on all sorts of things. And if I'm standing in front of the Public Accounts Committee, it's usually about a very traditional, well, I don't, but if I did, it was usually about traditional version of how public money is spent. But again, we're starting to see some interesting examples of different practice coming through, and one of those I've been working with Julia and colleagues at L&G on for some time now, which is around health inequalities and thinking about how you can judge capital investments on the basis to which there is a clean line to reduction in health inequalities, activating the part of the population that cannot or are not in work for various reasons, linking that then to the kind of employment support work that we do as well. So I think there's room for a little more thinking in that space as well.
Okay, great. So, Julia, final word to you. There's also a question, if you want to pick up on it in your answers, which is what support from central government do you think mayoral combined authorities want to see more of to help them secure greater investment into their regions?
Okay, I think the previous round of questions, a lot of that was around what's important and how do you measure it. So from the inclusive economy point, what I find so inspiring about what's going on at the Helix is that process around what's the impact of this innovation campus on the community immediately around it, which is actually quite deprived, wasn't just part of the design process. It is an ongoing conversation around how those assets operate. There is a team whose job it is to bring in every age of the surrounding communities in to experience it. So these aren't glass shiny buildings where mysteries happen. They're things that will be jobs that they can relate to and aspire to and deliver, which I think goes back to the rate of return piece as well, because as an institutional investor, a lot of long-term interests are aligned. If ultimately what we're looking for is a long-term income, which, by the way, will give you the cheapest form of institutional capital as well, then actually having nice public realm that's going to endure for the lifetime of the buildings isn't just important for the community, it's really important for us, because the better kept those assets are, then the lower the risk attached to us being able to secure a long-term income. And then there's this piece around what you measure, where it can be really hard, because, are you talking about hard kind of output metrics of what things specifically deliver versus longer term outcomes, like around, the social determinants of health, which are much bigger than kind of, any of us individually. And within L&G, we've tried to take that down to a project level and have a place-based toolkit. So when we're looking at projects, we can work with our partners to say, actually, what does this project need to deliver, both in terms of immediate impacts, but also what are the bigger outcomes that we're trying to influence as well. And we can be clear that it's more difficult to attribute some of those benefits, but at least we're then starting to try and connect the dots, and it also enables us to be really clear with partners at the start. Are we aligned in terms of values? In terms of government, I think for me the key piece is that it has to be kind of an effective collaborative dialogue, and this is an evolving bit of institutional governance, and it will evolve further as more non-city focused strategic authorities come into the mix as well. So I think the dynamics around this is all just kind of metro city agenda is going to change too. So I just think government also need to be prepared for what that means for how the dynamics of that relationship will continue to evolve, and to kind of lean in with the mayoral and strategic authorities kind of into mapping out what that looks like.
Great. Okay, so thank you all for joining us. Apologies to those who were unable to put your questions to the panel. Do join us for coffee afterwards, and you can ask people in a more informal way what it was that you wanted to ask the panel in public. So thanks again to L&G for working with us on this event and this series. As I say, in 2 and a bit weeks we'll be in Leeds for a similar session on devolution and transport connectivity. More events to come, watch this space. So final thing for me to say is just thank you to our excellent panel. Please join me in showing our appreciation to them.